Well, I gotta tell you, over the last week it hasn't been pleasant for me because I have not been feeling well. But today I'm on medication. So I was able to get a lot done. So this update is basically what I did today. So I tried a new recipe for no knead bread. Basically, you just put all the ingredients together and let it sit and rise for 2 hours. Then you shape it into your loaves and you just bake it. So I was like, I'm down with that. So I tried it, and you just let it sit covered here. Now, a lot of recipes say set it in a warm location, especially when you're doing some kind of bread or rolls. Well, I've always had a lot of trouble finding a warm location in my kitchen for the bread to rise. So here is a little tip. You see the mat that I have sitting there? That's actually a heat mat for starting plants. So I thought, hey, anytime you can have a dual purpose for something on a homestead. I have used it in the kitchen several times as a quote-unquote warm location. I set it to like 85 degrees. I put the sensor on the mat to make sure the mat is 85 degrees. And then I just set the bowl or whatever on there and let it rise, and it has been doing great. So there is a tip for you. If you garden and you also need to raise bread, there you go. I'm going to put a link to that exact mat that I have because it does work really well. And I'm going to put a link to that in the description. So while my bread was rising, it had to rise like 2 hours. It's an easy bread, but 2-hour rise time. So while I was doing that, I decided to take some of the tomatoes. A lot of times at the end of the season, you have those few tomatoes that it's not enough to like can or do anything like that. So you either eat them fresh, or what I did was I tried a recipe for roasting tomatoes. And oh my goodness, you talk about a trip to Flavortown. This is it. The roasted tomatoes were spectacular, and I'm going to put a link to that recipe. It's actually the Barefoot Contessa, Ina Garten from Food Network. It's her recipe, and it was awesome. So I'm going to put a link to that down in the description. While my tomatoes were roasting, I decided, since I grew heirloom tomatoes, they're the kind is called Delicious, but they're heirloom, so you can actually save the seeds. If you have a hybrid or a GMO type tomato or plant that you have planted, then you're not guaranteed how the seed is going to do the next year, if it's going to be as good or just like what you grew the year before. But if you save heirloom seeds, then it's repetitive over and over. Same quality, same kind, everything. So what I decided to do was save some of the seeds from the tomatoes that I was using to roast tomatoes. And so I got them all washed up, and I put them on this paper towel. And I thought, okay, now I'll just let them dry. It's cool. But they stuck so hard to the paper towel. So seed saving 101, do not dry them on a paper towel. Oh my God, they are so stuck to this paper towel. I've just been peeling some off and then dumping it over here. So once my dough was ready, I just made 3 rough shaped little loaves, because basically my plan was to cut these in half and do some open face sandwich type things with my roasted tomatoes. So I cut them in half, and this sauce right here, it's called Parmesan garlic herb wing sauce, actually from Buffalo Wild Wings, that you can just buy in the grocery store. But let me tell you, this sauce is not just for wings. It is very, very flavorful, and it went really well with what I was doing. So I open-faced the loaves of bread. I put this sauce on it. Then I wanted to do provolone cheese, but I didn't have any. So I used Swiss cheese. And then I put that under the broiler and got it nice and gooey and a little bit brown. Then I took it out and I put the roasted tomatoes on top and served it up with some roasted carrots from dinner last night. And I'll tell you what, that made an amazing lunch. So you should try it, especially try the roasted tomatoes. And then I want to talk about one more thing. Do you remember, if you watched the very first video when I was taking you around the place, and down by the garden there were these greens that I said we had to figure out what that was? I am so excited. It's horseradish. I have identified it. It's horseradish. And after the first freeze, we're going to harvest that. There are so many medicinal properties for horseradish. I have been planning to do a medicinal garden, and you see our flagpole area there. It's kind of a garden that's been let go. We're going to tear all that out, and I am going to make that into a medicinal plant garden, because we're on a homestead. We want to be able to provide for ourselves, and I have been learning about some amazing plants that we can grow with tons of uses. But for horseradish, the medicinal uses are as an antiseptic. It's good for the digestive system. It's a diuretic. It can be a stimulant, a laxative, and an expectorant. It's powerful for controlling bacterial infections. It can be used internally and externally for colds, flus, fevers, urinary tract infections, infected wounds. This is just, I am just so over the moon that is horseradish. So you can stay tuned for a future video on my medicinal herb garden and what I'm going to be putting in there, and for our harvesting of the horseradish. Not to mention it adds a nice little hot bite to your food. So anyway, that's what I have been doing today. We'll be doing another update soon. Have a good one.